my name is Nicole Dennis-Benn, and I am the author of Patsy. And Patsy is a very personal story to me. Patsy actually came about when I was riding the subway. I used to work at the College of Staten Island, and I would take the train, the 4 train from Crown Heights, Brooklyn to the Staten Island ferry. And while I was in commute, I was traveling with these other immigrants. They were mostly Caribbean immigrants. And how I know that they were speaking amongst themselves, so I was hearing Trini accent, Jamaican accent, Bayesian accent. And right above our heads were these advertisements, like sandals advertisements, come to Jamaica, come to Barbados for a break from the winter. And I said to myself, wow, that's such an irony, because here we were hustling in New York City on the subway early morning, going to our various jobs, but yet still people are being told, oh, come to our country that we fled or that we migrated from for vacation, countries that we couldn't have partaken in those same resorts or those beaches had we not had certain means. And so Patsy came to me right then, because I started writing the story of a woman who perhaps was on the subway with me, going to her nanny position on the Upper West Side or the Upper East Side. And as a writer, I have a very active imagination. So I started imagining this woman and what she left behind in Jamaica and what version of herself she brought to the United States. And that actually came out in a series of letters. So she would write her observations, dear mama, today it snowed, or dear mama, I walked on 34th Street today. Little things like that. That was how Patsy came to me at first. And being an immigrant myself, I remembered how much it was to actually call back home and say the things that you're observing in this new country, in this new world. And mind you, America was sold as a fantasy to a lot of us. So in Patsy's letters, it was that fantasy. But then I think during draft 2, that's when I realized Patsy left more than her country. She left a daughter, 5-year-old True. And when that part of the story started opening up to me, I was so kind of reluctant to write it, because in my mind I was like, wow, this woman actually abandoned her child. Would she be likable as a character? And it wasn't until I went back to the page and also did some self-reflection that I realized that I needed to tell a story like that of a woman who dared to admit to herself that she didn't want children. Something that, of course, deemed in our society as very not the most popular decision to come to, but at the same time I needed to tell a story like that, given that it's untold for the most part, and so wanted to flesh out more of that character and that part of her story as well. So that's really it in a nutshell. And like writing the untold narratives that Jamaican women, especially our women in general, have. And in addition to that, writing the story of an immigrant who is not coming to America for altruistic reasons. She's coming to reinvent herself as a woman. So really, that was really where I was going at first with that story.
That's really, really interesting to see where Patsy came from or comes from. Yes. Because why do you think some people have been so occupied by the fact that Patsy leaves her daughter behind, right, to fulfill her dreams? And do you think readers and society in general would react differently towards Patsy if she were a man?
Oh my gosh, they definitely would not have a reaction. In fact, if it were a man, there would be no story, because we hear it all the time, especially in the Caribbean, and even in Africa, for example. Men go off to work all the time in the UK, in the US, in Canada, and leave the women and children home. And it's just a thing that happens. Or even if you're looking at like first world countries, men go off all the time on business trips, and it's the mother and the child at home. So I felt like, wow, what if I flip the gender and make it a woman who goes off and leaves the family? And of course, I guess in my mind, I wanted to start a conversation about that, maybe with myself first, and then with readers, what if it's a woman? And so with Patsy, she went off. She was the person who went off, but also to even more than that, she abandons her child. And then again, that whole question, like, oh my gosh, a woman abandons her child, oh, completely unheard of, but it's more common than we know. And so wanted to have that conversation about gender dynamics. And you're right, it's kind of like a double standard that I wanted to unpack with that.
So how much, if at all, have Patsy's experiences in the novel been influenced by the fact that she finds herself at the intersection of race and gender?
Whew. That's something that, as a writer too of color, I wanted to incorporate that intersectionality. You know, here she is, this working class Jamaican black woman, and who also happens to be, you know, I mean, given that. For me, as a woman writer too, wanted to incorporate everything that we have gone through as women in our society, often marginalized. Our stories have not been told for the most part, or when our stories are told, we're always often seen as caricatures. So I wanted to create a character with that complexity, you know, and that intersection of, yes, her race, gender, sexuality, as well, and of course then her immigrant status in America, because people also when we talk about immigration in a country like the United States, and maybe in the UK too, I feel like it's different for an immigrant who is like a black or brown person, as opposed to like an immigrant coming as a white person. And similarly, you know, like how Patsy is different as a woman migrating as opposed to a man migrating. So all those margins that she's sitting within, I wanted to explore that and have them clash or collide, if that makes any sense, as well.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. What role do class and race to put together play in Patsy, especially class?
Class, a huge role. First of all, the immigrants who are leaving Jamaica are usually working class immigrants. Immigrants who are not necessarily, they didn't necessarily have the educational background or the opportunities back home, because upward mobility is really hard for working class Jamaicans. So most of us come here. I'm a working class Jamaican who also look to the United States as my out, my ability to now have the opportunities I've never had before. And so in writing Patsy, you know, it was important for me to document that, what it's like for those immigrants who never had those opportunities to come to our country, but then also facing barriers. They don't have the right visa, but they also don't have the right education. They're not coming to America with educational fellowships or in the tech industry. These are people who are coming to take the jobs that nobody else would do. And so I wanted to really document that, especially given, again, not seeing that in literature and wanting very much for people to see who these individuals are.